Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Malcolm Teasdale with us today. He's an international business consultant, author, and public speaker. We're gonna talk about various things today: adventure, traveling, public speaking, his early retirement, and the classic startup to acquisition story. This podcast is brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start a podcast, I can help you do that. Monetize through AdWords, monetize through sponsors paying you per episode, and also generating leads through your podcast. We help you monetize podcasting. If you're having plans to start your podcast in 2025, you can go to podpire.com. Malcolm, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're doing nowadays.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Thanks for having me on. I don't know where to start, actually. I've got an accent, so I was born and raised in England, Coventry, England, but I've been living here over half my life, with the exception of the other half in England, 2 years in Canada, 2 years in Singapore. Depends how far you want me to go back. Is it just the last few years or so, or what?
Your whole life. It's always a great question because it has you think of your identity nowadays, but also what you went through life. I see like co-founder of Prairie Fire Software, 15 years at that. So that must have shaped you, hasn't it?
Yeah, let me start with that because it's a good place to start, actually. Basically, myself and a work colleague of mine worked for a technology company for many years, and they were responsible for moving me when I was living in Canada back to the UK, then in turn from the UK to Florida back in 1985. So I worked for them. And over the years, based on what I did, my last position at the company was managed technical support for the company. But myself and this guy who he was more in the development, we decided to branch off and do our own thing and to create a product that we thought was needed in the marketplace. And our existing company had one, but it was a bit dated, but their focus was on something else, telecommunications. So we started this organization, and we did quite well. We brought the right people on board, engineers. We were a software development company, basically. And we did quite well, and we spread out in the United States and Canada. And ultimately, we thought it'd be a good idea to spread out internationally. And that was a good thing to do because we realized there was a global need for our product. In so much over time, we translated our product or user interface into about 7 or 8 different languages, to help our case. And I actually moved over to Singapore to drive the business over in Asia, Pacific region. We'd already branched out into Europe and Latin America as well. Ultimately, though, over 15 years, we had established a global presence in 80 countries worldwide, had offices in 4 countries, and we had not a large workforce, but about 150 people, and most are engineers. But we were a target for acquisition, and based on our intellectual property and our workforce, and that's what happened. Ultimately, is that my partner, he was he was a bit older than me, and he wanted to bow out gracefully. So I said, well, okay, got it, let's do it. And we took an offer, and we retired early in the year 2013. We signed, obviously, the usual long non-compete clauses, which obviously I understand that, but we bowed out gracefully. And that was it. So from a startup to acquisition over 15 years, that's a classic story, but it was mainly based on the groundwork we enabled internationally, the products we had, of course, but what we did in the international market, which was very, very important. Since then, rather than stick at home and got bored, being not in a corporate workplace, I always used to travel on business, by the way, substantially. That's why we got the business. But I decided to go on more adventure travel. So I went to places off the beaten track where not many people would dare to go to, basically, like trek the Himalayas and camped in the Mongolian wilderness and various bizarre things like that. And that was very fulfilling. And I still do that today. And, I've been writing books, and I've also got a couple of podcasts. So I'm keeping busy, which is the main thing. But that was it, technology, startup, selling it, trying to enjoy my life a little bit more now. And that's what I do. I still advise people also when I can, if they got any questions about, well, what do I do with my company to create more sales and all that stuff. So I can advise in that capacity as well. But that's pretty much it, you know.
So for 15 years, it was a cash cow, and at some point you decided to have an exit. What challenges did you face along the way?
Well, there's always going to be challenges. You know, obviously we had competitors out in the marketplace, but we felt we had a product that was sort of technology wise sort of new. It was, I know it sounds a bit bizarre, but back at that time we developed a product we did to be more web based, and that was good. But as when you grow a company, we had a fantastic workforce because we had a great human resources department. Yeah, we lost a few people along the way, but you know, it's it's part of building the company. And we lost deals we thought we could get, but because of a failure, you learn from your mistakes and move on, and that's it. For someone to say, "Yeah, I started a business; it was perfect all the way along and never had any issues," well, they're not telling the truth because everyone has issues when you're growing a company and along the way. But generally speaking, look back, and it was a great decision we made to branch out on ourselves all those years ago in the 90s. And that's great memories, and we can look back on that and pat ourselves on the back. So, but yeah, there's some issues, technology issues, of course. Every piece of software ever invented has mistakes in it, and that's why we're always developing it and repairing it. So that was just fine. And so there we go. That's it to the present day.
And that was like 10 years ago. So are these lessons and is that startup PTSD still fresh to you, or do you feel you've put that behind you and nowadays you're mostly chilling?
It's behind me, but never forgotten. I still in touch with a number of our old employees, and they always look back onto that era. So it was a start of a career for them, and they went on to do great things, work for large corporations, and start their own business. So it's great to look back on and reflect of those times, compare it to what it's like today, look at the similarities. But as far as that business is concerned, I look back on it, and that's about it. We did what we did at the time. If we were fast forward starting today, it would be different, but our mentality is such that it would be the same, And one thing I would stress to companies out there who are starting up in even in the United States or Canada, look for international business. You'll be surprised who might like your product. It sounds really strange, but I'd always encourage that because there's more out there than people realize. So that was a good move for us, and it certainly paid off. It doesn't matter where it is in the world. It was Asia, Europe, Latin America. There might be companies out there who already have a business, but they like to have these add-on products that they could sell as well, just in case. So there's always opportunities if you look.
Right. And 15 years is a pretty long time, pretty long journey. Was your goal when you started out that business always to have an exit and travel the world for the rest of your life?
Well, for start, when we started off, that we had no idea. We never thought of acquisition or anything like that. It was to start a business on our own, and the mindset of if we don't do it now, we never will, and that's why we started doing it. And as time progressed over the latter years, when we knew we might be a target for acquisition, then it started entering our brain cells. But at the same time, we still had work to do. And ultimately, when we effectively retired early, 2013, I never thought at that time that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. Times have changed. So in a way, it's positive, but I'm always looking for stuff to do. I've got to learn something new each day. Generally speaking about foreign lands or foreign cultures, I lecture on that. I do public speaking engagements today, by the way, for various cruise lines around the world. So I get invited on to talk about foreign cultures and all that, because I'm quite familiar with them, having traveled to well over 100 countries in my life. So yeah, I can talk about that. And people said, so what's it like? What's it like when you went to India, or what's it like going to the land down under? And I have some stories to tell, and some of it's enlightening. But I always say one thing to people: if they go to venture out, look for international business, always learn a little about the place you're going to, a little bit of their history and a little bit of their culture, so you'll be able to hit the ground running and fit right in and become their friends.
Right.
Valuable information.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to travel as well. It's called digital nomading. Nowadays, a lot of people do it. They have their own business, their own incomes, and they can work while traveling without to have to wait for the big exit. Traveling, yeah, taught me that we're all very much similar, all humans on this planet Earth with some uh, cultural asterisks, right? And yet I've had to be creative in many situations and get out of my comfort zone to solve problems while traveling. It's not just like fun and games, especially while you're working, all the Wi-Fi issues and stuff. So, what have you learned in your journey? You've done way more countries than I did, and really interesting one. You spent time in the Himalayas and took countries, Russia as well. So, what have you learned since all that traveling?
I like, well, if I could put things in a nutshell, there's a lot to learn about foreign cultures. Globally, we're all the same. People, wherever you go, they're brought up a little bit different than we were. It doesn't mean what we do here in the United States is correct, or Britain. Some countries do things better than we do here. But everyone, all the human beings I've met, generally speaking, are just decent people. They have a story to tell about their upbringing, and they're happy. They're happy the way they live. And it could be that it could, where I've been, trek the Himalayas, like I mentioned, but visiting these people in mountain villages along the way, kids still go to school in school uniform. 8,000 feet up in the mountains, they still go to school in school uniform. And I talk to the people that they're happy. They don't have reason to change that. Their standard of life is great, and they're happy with the way they lead it. Same with the people who live in the Mongolian wilderness. I spent days with the nomadic families. I met a lot of people, and I just learned a bit about the way they live. And basically, we're all the same, and we should, if we learn more about each other and the way people live, we'd have more respect for other countries in the world. There'd be less squabbling, arguing, and negative thoughts, and we could all get along a bit better. So, yeah, the story continues.
Did you get tired of traveling? Because I did, taking planes and constantly being on the move. Just got tired of that, especially post COVID. So, yeah, getting into airports and all of that, airplanes. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I was wary of it, and during the early days, I didn't do much actually. It's when I first started doing a podcast, to be honest with you. During that period of time, I thought, I'll give this a go. So, and it got to the point where things started to improve, and I started to venture off into foreign lands. I thought, well, I had the vaccines, I had the boosters. I thought, well, I'll take a chance. You can still get COVID today. So I thought, what's the worst that can happen? So yeah, It didn't hold me back. It held me back somewhat, but when I thought it was sort of okay, I started to hit the road again.
Where are you traveling to nowadays? What are your next destinations and why?
I just came back. I was contracted by cruise line, and it took out of Aruba and sailed completely around the Caribbean, Greater Antilles, Lesser Antilles, and back down to Barbados. So I was lecturing on there, and then came back. That's it for the year. I'll leave um, next week, 26th. In Britain, we call it Boxing Day, but it's day after Christmas Day. I'm going down to the Turks and Caicos Islands for 3 weeks, which I do every year. and I've got a couple of transatlantic cruise next April, and one up in the Nordics a bit later on in the year. And I'll just talk about foreign cultures, the geographical location, adventure travel, sometimes about business as well, and how the world works basically. And that's my quest: learn how the world works, lives and works. It's very fulfilling. Gives people more respect and understanding of other nations. So I'll continue to do that. So I've got a fair bit of speaking to do next year.
And business wise, how have you occupied yourself in the last 10 years? Like, are you still trying to build something exciting and something that will have you have a big exit? Like, what are you chasing nowadays and what tools are you learning?
Um, I'm not really chasing anything. I do have a quest to learn more stuff. Um, I'm looking for more land-based public speaking engagements. So going all the way off to foreign lands to get on a cruise ship. Earlier on this year, March, I flew to Asia to get on a cruise ship. That's fantastic, just to get off the ports. And I just stayed a bit longer over there. And then I went to the country of Bhutan and climbed up the mountain there to Tiger's Nest Monastery. That's another story. But, um, it's this is fulfilling to me. Um, I don't need to get back in the 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 workplace. But as long as I can pass on what I've learned over the years to other people and advise if they want my advice or how to become fulfilled in life or have something to look forward to, which is a big thing, then I can probably help, you know.
Are most people unfulfilled?
Well, there's people still bored. Um, and there's people down in the dumps, or they're looking for things to do. But when they hear travel stories, what I found is when I talk about my travel stories, the takeaways from it are people saying, I didn't know that. I need to get out more. These are the things I need to add that to my bucket list. Sort of overused term, but it is true. They need to sort of get out of town more and learn how the rest of the world lives and works. And that in itself is educational and fulfilling personally, because people I know, similar to me, who go out and do this, they said that's brilliant. It's just a great thing to do. In other words, don't have any regrets in life, which is basically what I want to do. It could be one day, I could be lying in my deathbed, they're getting ready to pull the plug on me. I thought, damn, I wish I did that. I don't want that in my life. So I keep going. So,
Right. And do you feel you've accomplished all the items on your bucket list? Would you die happy?
well, I do have a bucket list. My problem is it's getting longer.
That's a good problem.
It is, because I keep adding more stuff to it. Generally speaking, about places I'd like to go to, or some place I'd like to go back to, and you know, funny enough, we just talked recently about the COVID era, but right at the end of 2021, I went to a place where people thought I was just bonkers to go. I was in Kiev in the Ukraine right before the conflict started. I wanted to do that. And what I found out, I spoke to a lot of people, a lot of citizens there. I found out how they lived. Unbelievable architecture in the city, beautiful place, great people. And I heard their story about really what they wanted. So when I came back, and the local newspaper, when I lived in Florida, got all of the story, and all of a sudden I found my mugshot on the front page of the newspaper saying, Destin, Florida man, went to Kiev. You want to know why? So anyway, it's just the story. But yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm intrigued by this stuff. I probably one day probably bite off more than I can chew. But anyway, you know.
You should have went to Chernobyl at the same time.
So what's that?
Chernobyl. You should have visited at the same time. Does dark tourism interest you?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, I still go where I can, as long as it's not stupid places. Obviously, places today you wouldn't want to go to, but yeah, it's the story, the adventure continues, as I say.
Yeah, well, Kiev would be qualified as pretty stupid for many. Like even I, which is pretty high on the risk-taking scale of things, probably wouldn't travel there. Even the flight to get to Kiev, I mean, it could be missile down by Russia. Like, what was the justification behind that decision? Like, did you revise your will before taking that flight?
I did that a long time ago, to be honest with you, just in case. And no, because I was going to be in Europe anyway. And I was thinking, where can I go to that's sort of okay and it's sort of safe, which it was at the time, although there were demonstrations in the city and I could feel the people there. But I was used to it. I mean, if you remember back in 1991, Charles, when it was the end of the Soviet Union. You remember that era?
Yes. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, no, because I wasn't conscious, but I've studied that period of time extensively.
Yeah. Well, guess what? I had to go to the embassy in Moscow there to do some technical advising work during the final days of the Soviet Union's existence, right before Gorbachev left. I was there towards the end of December 2021. It was a fantastic experience, but talk about seeing changes. And, people thought I was bonkers doing it. I was in Cairo in Egypt during the first Gulf crisis as well. And, you know, it's all right. I mean, I wanted to go and there was technical issues, which at the time I was probably the best qualified to fix them. So I went. It doesn't bother me much now, actually, but there's a few countries on the list I probably wouldn't go to today, and I think you know who they are.
Yeah. It's funny that world leaders tend to travel a lot and most of them educate themselves on the world a lot, but some of them are close minded a lot, like Trump, like Putin. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, yeah. People tend to be closed-minded about that. Here's a classic example. Um, when I travel somewhere, I was look at the travel.state.gov website, but it's not the only one to look at because I look at the Canadian one and the UK one, the equivalent of. For probably 4 years ago, I went to St. Petersburg in Russia, and the travel.state.gov website they said don't go there. The consulate just got closed down. So I checked the Canadian one and the UK one. Said, it's just fine. So I went there and it was just fine. So I spent a couple of nights in the city, fantastic city, and it was perfectly all right. You know, I didn't feel threatened at all. But that's why I always look at all the three travel sites to make sure either exaggerated fear, information out of date, or whatever. I just make a decision on that. So anyway, again, people thought, what are you going there for? Is Russia? No, it's that's not as bad as you think. No, nothing wrong with it. So.
And why do you think leaders are so close minded, even though they have extensive traveling under their belt?
Um, well, I always thought the most dangerous thing in the world are big egos, right, in people. And this goes back centuries and to every part of the world, which I've learned. If you look back in history, some part in the world has been under stress or trouble, whether it's colonization, conflict, wars. Is substantial. It has been, like in the Caribbean, you wouldn't expect it, but it has. Colonization, blame the Brits, the French, and the Spanish, and the Dutch, even, to a degree. But you go elsewhere, it could be Asia, Latin America, it could be anywhere. And everywhere in the world has at some time in their history had times of conflict, people dying unnecessarily. But today, I mean, there's power grabs going on, land grabs going on. It's just part of the life. But so many people get needlessly killed, not ordinary people like us, next door neighbor, people where I live, and it's horrible. And we should all learn better to get along with each other, and learn that rather than be more interested in power.
Yeah, if life is good, it should be a right for everyone to live and not oppress the others and sort of stay in their lanes, right? But some individuals, they're like black holes, you know, they're
Yeah.
egotistic black holes. They always want more, and that leads to the destruction of this planet. Where can people find out more about you, Malcolm?
Um, well, they can Google me. MalcolmTeasdale.com is my website, and I've got a website dedicated to books I've written. I've written five books and 3 audio books, but that's on travelingenglishman.com. But MalcolmTeasdale.com is the main site, and if you Google me, you'll probably see me on there, some videos or whatever. I don't know, but that's probably the best thing, you know.
It was Malcolm Teasdale.